Story 1. I went to summer camp a few times when I was a Boy Scout. It was usually pretty fun, especially the parts of the day where we could do whatever we wanted. No one was really interested in earning new merit badges unless it was for something cool like wakeboarding. All we really cared about was hanging out in the woods and swimming in the springs to beat the heat. It was a good time to simply be away from home and our parents for a week, and the only thing a Boy Scout was missing was a girl to flirt with. At first, I thought I'd go to summer camp every year if I could. However, things took a turn when he was 14. After this journey, I left my troop and never camped again. It was on the 4th day of summer camp, right in the middle of it all. As for responsibilities, it was a light day for me and my friends. There were 4 of us in total. We ran around the main common area of the camp, used our allowances to each buy a souvenir knife at the general store, drank some yoo-hoos, and threw some tomahawks with the sky between their classes. Eventually, 2 of us decided we were tired and sweaty and just wanted to sit in our tents until dinner time. But my closest friend, Joshua, and I wanted to move on. There was a network of trails that meandered through all the different campgrounds. We had already taken the trail to the springs, so Josh and I wanted to explore a little more. There were 2 of us, so we both had canteens full of water and snacks in our pockets, along with knives and rope, a map and compass, and I had a small first aid kit, so we thought we were prepared for anything we found out there. We also didn't plan to go far, as we had to be back in just under 3 hours for dinner. We left our troops' camp with enough daylight and headed towards a mosquito-infested area in the woods. The canopy shaded us quite well. The air was humid and suffocating. We wanted to see what it was like to be out there, but all we found out was that the trees were a little taller. It wasn't long before we started chatting about the sound of afternoon bugs, the kind of bonding one would expect between 2 14-year-olds in the woods. We talked mainly about girls and the ones we thought were ugly and so on. I admit that none of it was very elegant. We jokingly proposed the possibility that we might go far enough to find our way to the Girl Scout section of the camp, which did exist, but was well separated from ours. It was then that our environment began to change inexplicably. Suddenly, a breeze came and washed away the warm blanket of moist, still air and replaced it with a cool, dry wind. Initially, this was a huge relief to Josh and me, who had been sweating profusely for hours, even in the shade. It also seemed to ward off all mosquitoes and gnats, which was a welcome bonus. But just moments later, the forest quickly darkened, and the sky above us, between the branches of the canopy, turned from vibrant blue to pale gray. "Hey Josh," I said worriedly. "I think it's going to rain." "Don't even say it," he agreed. "Rather, we're about to get into a thunderstorm," I suggested. "Should we turn around?" I proposed. "No," Joshua replied confidently, looking at his compass. "The trail we're on curves back to camp. Right now we're going north, which means we're right in the middle. We could move on." "Well, it's okay then," I said. Josh seemed to be pretty confident in his sailing skills, so I let him make the decision to move on. However, the threat of being soaked to the bone dampened the mood, and as such, there was a silence in the conversation. We continued walking, listening to the approaching thunder and hoping to feel the first drop of rain fall on our heads. Except they never arrived. The darkness that enveloped us only increased, but the rain never fell. "Hey Josh," I said again, even more worried this time. "Can you see the time, man? I think we could have missed dinner." Josh looked at his watch. "No way, friend. We've just been walking." And then, suddenly, Joshua fell silent and stopped in his tracks. "What's wrong, buddy?" I asked. "My watch is dead," he said gravely. "How is that possible?" I thought you had changed the battery before you went to camp." Joshua silenced me and began to look around. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. I listened, but I heard nothing. In fact, I heard so much about nothing that it filled me with fear. It was total silence. There was not a single sound in the forest around us. It was an unnatural silence, devoid of cicadas or even flies. For a minute, I listened deeper into the forest with my ears and heard only silence. until finally I heard chants. Angelic songs. But it was so soft and quiet that it was almost inaudible, but unmistakably the voice of a beautiful woman. Just from the way Josh looked at me at that moment, wide-eyed and smiling, I knew I'd heard him too. "Oh, it's the Girl Scouts," she exclaimed. Before he could even answer, he dashed into the forest following the sounds. "Wait! Josh, stop!" I started to go with him, but by the time I had taken 10 steps off the trail, I realized I couldn't see well enough to keep going. It was as if the sky had fallen. The darkness, like midnight, had extinguished the daylight in just a moment. A deep sense of dread filled my body, telling me to back off. I took the 10 steps I had taken without even turning until I felt the flatness of the path under my shoe again. At this point, all I could hear was my own breathing and heartbeat, and the singing of whoever was in the forest growing louder and getting closer to me. But something was wrong. The sound was no longer coming from just one direction. Somehow it was surrounding me, closing in on me. I was too strong to bear, and I felt like it was putting physical pressure on my body. I tried to cover my ears, but it was useless. Everything became a single and piercing scream. Finally, I heard a scream. It was a child's cry. It tore its way through the cacophony and returned my surroundings to total silence, except for the echo of someone's cry for help. "Josh!" I called to the forest. "Go back!" There was no response. A moment later, I heard a creak on the trail from the direction we had come from. I expected to see Joshua, but I didn't see him. There was no human figure at the nearest bend in the path, only the form of a tall woman, but composed of no flesh and bone at all, just an ominous light. As I contemplated whatever spirit it was, it suddenly lunged at me. What I did next was pure instinct. I abandoned Josh and ran blindly down the trail as fast as my body could take me. I didn't stop until I got back to camp, collapsing on the ground. When I looked up, I saw that everything was different. The sun was shining, the forests were full of life with birds and insects, and all my friends came to see what was wrong with me, why I was so upset and nervous. I couldn't articulate a word for hours. When I was finally able to tell the scout teachers what had happened, they didn't believe me. They sent a search team to find Josh, but they couldn't find a single clue about him. Even the police were never able to locate him. It just disappeared. Suspicion eventually fell on me because the story I told was so incredible. So, to avoid being committed to an asylum, I ended up changing my official statement to that I lost track of him when we both went to pee in separate trees, and then I turned around for a minute and he disappeared. And in my worry and panic, I thought I saw something that wasn't there. But it's all lies because I know what happened. Story 2. A few months ago, during spring break, I sent you a story that happened between a friend of mine named Lucila and her creepy ex-boyfriend, Pablo. Now there is a part 2 of this story. It was around 5 in the morning at the usual meeting place of our group of friends. Pablo suddenly appeared and convinced Lucila to go with him by car instead of sleeping drunk in his car. And, unsurprisingly, this was a ruse to basically kidnap her and make God knows what. I was the only person around at the time, and out of suspicion, I followed them in my car and managed to stop what was about to happen. Many of the comments on that video rightly said that if she were his friend, he should never have let her get in the car with him, and that's true. Some people even said that somehow I was a jerk for harboring feelings and trying to be some kind of white knight, but honestly, I just want to take care of the people I care about. Unfortunately, what happened last spring break was just a prelude to what happened last week during the summer. It's almost August at the time of writing, and Lucila has been back in town since June. No one had seen Pablo, her clingy and mentally unstable ex-boyfriend, since the attempted kidnapping. The owner of the establishment we frequented made it clear to all of us that Pablo was forbidden on the premises, which helped Lucila feel a little safer. However, when someone is seriously obsessed and when their obsession is combined with drug abuse, they will sometimes find any way to push boundaries and eventually cross them. This is the case with Paul. No one even mentioned his name all summer until recently his name began to circulate and whisper like a ghost. Friends of ours were sure they had seen him lurking in the shadows of the parking lot. But when they came out to look again, no one was there. I had a feeling that something wasn't right, but I didn't quite trust my gut. A few nights ago, a group of us were hanging out after closing time at the bar, 4 or 5 in total, including the owner. I ran out of cigarettes, but I remembered that I had another pack in my car, so I went out to get some. As per protocol after closing time, the door closed behind me until I returned. It was a little after 3 in the morning. I recognized every car in the parking lot as my friend's, so I was pretty sure everything was safe. I got to my car and opened the door to reach the pack of cigarettes in the cup holder, but just as I was leaning over, I felt someone push me. I quickly got out of my car and looked back at whoever it was. To my amazement, it was Pablo. He looked more out and high than ever. It was in front of me and had me cornered in the corner of my car door. "Hey, you idiot! It's been a while, hasn't it?" he shouted. "You were in there with Lucila, I guess, getting comfortable with her, huh?" He pointed to the bar, where Lucila had also parked. "Oh, let me guess. Are you seeing her in the parking lot? Are you coming to get some condoms?" You could tell that Paul was under the influence of something by how fast he spoke, which only meant that he was more unstable than usual. "No way, man, not at all, I swear. Now I have a girlfriend." I put my hands up in surrender. "I'm just coming to get some cigarettes. Man, look." Then I showed him the package in my hands. Instantly, he slapped it away and threw it into a nearby gutter. "Don't lie to me, Spencer," he hissed. "I know you've been trying to get into their pants for months. You got everyone to side with you. It's not like that at all, man, I swear. Now I have a girlfriend." I tried to calm him down. He knew that would probably infuriate him, and so it did. He shouted something unintelligible and tried to catch up with me, but I managed to jump back in my car and close the door before he could reach me. Just then he screamed in pain, and I realized that his finger had gotten stuck in the door. He opened it to free himself, but I immediately stepped back with both hands and locked the door. In his pain and rage, Pablo began to break the window and threatened me through the glass. So I pulled out my phone and called the bar owner. "We have a problem with Pablo," I said in all seriousness. "Please tell me you're joking," he replied. "No, I'm not kidding. He's literally in the parking lot right now and he's acting crazy," I replied. The owner quickly got out and swore as he walked to his car. "There's no way," I muttered in disbelief as I watched Pablo walk away from my back door toward the bar. I jumped out of the car and ran toward it, trying to catch up with it before it reached Lucila, who had just turned the corner. The expression on his face said it all. As soon as she saw Paul running towards her, she quickly turned around. Unfortunately, I couldn't catch up to Pablo. He had an advantage and a lot of cocaine in his system to stoke him. But luckily, by the time I got to the back door, he was already there knocking to get in. His finger was cut and bloody, and he barely noticed me standing there as the landlady came out to push and scold him. "Get out of here, man. You are forbidden. If you come back again, I will call the police," the owner told her as she closed the door behind her. Behind the owner, a friend of mine was inside, waving for her to come in. I followed him quietly and went inside. The last thing I saw was Pablo walking away with a bleeding nose before the door closed. I don't blame Lucila for being quite shaken by the whole situation. I mean, imagine you go outside to sleep in your car and the first thing you see is a crazy person who's obsessed with you running straight at you. Over time, Paul's appearances have not ceased. Whenever someone walks alone through the late, dark parking lot, he's always lurking just out of sight, escaping as soon as he's noticed. My friends don't let Lucila go to her car alone anymore, and she's been spending more time at home. I think this is honestly getting ridiculous. It's time for harassment charges or a restraining order, or maybe it's time for all of us to be 100% real and actually just stop this guy when he crosses the line, because clearly a broken nose and a head full of drugs weren't enough of a warning. But I don't know, I guess I'm just talking. Story 3. I used to work at the small summer camp as a monitor. It was my first job when I was 17. It was the most fun experience I could have in any job at that age. Plus it allowed me to get away from my parents' house for a month. I didn't come from an ideal background, so in this camp there were 5 buildings. The boys' dormitories, the girls' dormitories, the monitors' dormitories, the main building we called the cabin, and a small bathroom building. The cabin was home to the cafeteria, the main office, and the nurse's office, where children who suffered some kind of injury were taken. The curfew for children was at 9 o'clock at night, which meant they couldn't be outside the dormitory buildings after that time. I made good friends with a boy named Manuel, who was 3 years older than me, but we got along well. It was a Friday night. I remember it because I knew it was the beginning of the weekend. For fun, Manuel and I went to hang out with 2 monitors, who I will leave out of this for privacy as I have not seen them in many years. The 4 of us went into the woods to smoke a little. One of the girls was in the middle of a sentence when all we heard was the rustling of leaves nearby, followed by what was surely a footstep. We all turn our heads in the same direction at the same time and listen to it. Then, a few seconds later, there was a blinding flash. At first, we didn't understand what was happening. We were all puzzled. We decided to abruptly end the smoking session and left the forest at an extremely fast pace. Being back at camp made us feel much safer right away, but we became paranoid thinking that we were being watched by one of the camp supervisors and that the flash was a picture they took of us. We would surely be fired if we were caught smoking marijuana. So, in a state of paranoid panic, we all ran to our respective dormitory buildings. But when I smoke marijuana, I get extremely paranoid and overanalyze everything. So, while I was in my bed, it was eating away at me inside. I wondered if it was really a camera flash and who took that photo. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to go to the cabin and see if there were any supervisors still working and tell the truth. Each monitor had a key to the building, so I unlocked the door leading to the cafeteria section and the door slammed shut behind me. As I entered the dark, empty building, the only light came from the hallway. I was walking down to get to the main office, hoping that there was still someone working. You might think I was crazy for doing this, but I'm not exaggerating when I say that I get paranoid and I really couldn't afford to lose this job for something that wasn't even my idea. However, I wanted to find out if any supervisors had seen what we were doing. As I walked down the hallway to the office, I quickly noticed that the office light was off. There was no one in the building. At that moment, I heard the familiar sound of the exit door of the cafeteria, through which I had just passed, closing again. Did you see me enter the building? Were they following me? I hid behind the hallway wall as I spied, waiting to see who was going to enter the hallway. But no one did. However, it took me longer than it should have been to notice something peeking around the door of the cafeteria. It was a person's head. He was doing exactly the same thing as me, looking in my direction. When I realized this, I didn't care about making noise anymore. I ran as fast as I could to the nearest exit, stomping on the wooden floor. I ran to the monitor's bedroom, where only 3 monitors were still relaxing in the common area, one of them being Manuel. I told him and him alone about what I had just witnessed. I didn't know what to think, except that I was being followed. I think Manuel could tell that I was being a little more paranoid about being under the influence of marijuana, so he told me to just go to my room and close the door. He made sure to close the main entrance of the building because I think I scared him that night too. I lay awake for a while, thinking nervously. There were so many unanswered questions from that night. The beds in the rooms of each monitor were right next to a window with no blinds, so the moonlight came in on clear nights, but not on this cloudy night. It was just pure darkness. However, after several hours lying down, my room was filled with light, but it wasn't a normal light, it was lightning. There was no thunder, not even rain. I looked out the window and all I saw was the silhouette of someone outside. When they noticed me, I saw that his hand made a gesture of greeting towards me. That was the last thing I could endure. I left my room screaming for Manuel. He had already gone to sleep at this point, so I knocked on his door until he opened. I told him that the man who was following me was at my window, so he went to check on me. But, as expected, he was already gone. Manuel asked me if I was still under the influence of marijuana. I told him that it was not at all. Hours had passed. I asked him if we should call the police or something. He said no. He told me to sleep on the floor of his room with my blankets if it made me feel better. I think he wanted me to do it because he was scared too, just like me. Although I didn't understand why he apparently didn't take this seriously on the surface, since he also saw the first figure in the forest with me. I slept in his room. He didn't want to sleep alone, he was too terrified. The next day, I went to the main office to speak with one of the supervisors. She didn't really know what to do. He didn't call the police, but he gave me permission to call them if anything else happened for the safety of the children. But nothing else happened, at least not until the last day on the job for the monitors. That day, the children had already gone home, and it was the day we were to pack up and leave. I woke up to 4 photos stuck in my window. An enlarged one of me in the woods that night with Manuel and the 2 girls, a second photo of me sleeping in my bed, a third photo of me entering the cabin building that night we smoked, confirming that I was being watched and followed, and the 4th photo, a close-up of my car's license plate. I took the photos and showed them to the same supervisor. He kept them as evidence after writing my entire story, including the part about smoking marijuana. This was many years ago and nothing ever happened again, but I was terrified that the photo on my badge was some kind of threat, that whoever took those photos would follow me. I still don't know who took those photos.